This week on Africa Update, Ecowas defense chiefs to meet ahead of plans to set up regional force to restore stability in parts of West Africa. We examine the role of multilateral organizations in conflict resolution on the continent. Also on the program, we'll look at how Rwandan animators are creating comic books to enhance child literacy. Plus, our Round of Africa, where we highlight some of the biggest stories on the African continent. This is Africa Update, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Ayuba Ilya. Thank you for joining. Ecowas defense chiefs will meet ahead of plans to set up regional force to restore stability in some parts of West Africa. West African leaders have said that they would establish a regional peacekeeping force to intervene in member states to help restore security and constitutional order in a region that has witnessed several coups in the past 2 years. The defense chiefs are expected to work out how the Ecowas force will operate when it comes to force. West and Central Africa has made strides in the past decade to shed its reputation as a coup belt, but the Economic Commission for West African States wants to do more to boost constitutional government in its member states. Take a look.
West African leaders said on Sunday that they would establish a peacekeeping force that could intervene to restore constitutional order in a region that has seen several coups in the last 2 years. The Economic Community of West African States was holding its annual summit in Nigeria's capital Abuja. A communique after the meeting said leaders want to recalibrate our security architecture to ensure that we take care of our own security. Here's Ecowas President Omar Aliyu Toure.
The leaders are determined to establish a regional force that will intervene in the event of need, whether this is against terrorism or to restore constitutional order in member countries.
Ecowas said defense chiefs would meet next month to work out how the force would operate. Toure also added that Ecowas leaders would ensure that the transition stays on course in Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea, countries that have all witnessed coups in the past 2 years.
There is no exception to the return to democracy as agreed in the transition time frame, in the transition agreement with ECOWAS.
Leaders also expressed concern over the continued detention of 46 Ivorian soldiers in Mali. They asked Malian authorities to release the soldiers by the end of this month, adding that they reserve the right to take certain measures. Earlier on Sunday, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari led a groundbreaking ceremony for a new Ecowas headquarters in Abuja.
Now, silencing the guns in Africa by 2020 was the key resolution during events to mark the 50th anniversary of the African Union, formerly the Organization of African Unity, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in 2013, as the continent unveiled its Transformation Agenda 2063. Now, about 10 years down the line, Africa has been further torn apart by conflicts which have engulfed several countries and regions, with new theaters constantly being opened domestically and regionally within member states. Now, while guns were over the years silenced in previous hotspots, tensions are now beginning to rise between Cote d'Ivoire and Mali, Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, Uganda, in addition to violent extremism in the Sahel. Let's take a look at some of these countries where you have active insurgency at the moment. You have Mali, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Niger, Cameroon, Democratic Republic of Congo, Mozambique, Kenya. These are some of the countries that are considered to have active insurgency at the moment. You also have low-level insurgency in Algeria, Morocco. You have Cote d'Ivoire, Sudan, and Ethiopia. Then other countries are also considered to have terrorist attack cells on the continent, and such as Mauritania, Senegal. You have Egypt, you have Uganda, you have Tanzania, and South Africa. Now, these are some of the hotspots on the continent at the moment. Now, one of the fundamental objectives of the Ecowas, African Union, the UN, and other multilateral organizations is to promote peace, security, and stability in member states. But to what extent has multilateralism promoted peace on the African continent? This is what we'll be looking at. Usman Mohammed is a professor of international relations and diplomacy. He is also the CEO, Center for Legislative Study in Africa. He joins me to talk more on this. Okay, thank you so much, Professor Usman Mohammed, for joining us on Africa Update at this moment.
Thank you.
All right. So let's start with giving a context here. We are talking about ECOWAS and the role that the organization plays in conflict resolution on the African continent. What's your assessment so far on how ECOWAS have handled conflict situation since its inception?
Well, in a regional organization such as Ecowas, that was formed in 1973, if I'm not mistaken, or is it 75? The organization has taken giant steps in its own mission and then protocol agreement between the pairs of states. And looking back at the journey so far so good. They have done a lot by defining the concept of regional integration. It will not be wrong to say that regional integration in its functional way has been witnessed by ECOWAS effort. Number one, the strengthening of trade integration in the region has gone far. The creation of an appropriate enabling environment for private sector development has gone far. The development of infrastructure programs in support of economic growth and regional integration has gone far. The development of strong public sector institutions and good governance have also gone far. The reduction of social exclusion and development of an inclusive civil society have been witnessed recently. Contribution to peace and security in the if you look at Liberia, Sierra Leone, and other conflict-prone areas, that has gone far as well. The building of an environmental programs for the regional level have gone far. And the strengthening of regions' interaction with other regions of the world have also been very loud. Lastly, ECOWAS conflict prevention framework of January 2008 has been the protocol agreement. It's an agreement that has been signed by all the member countries. And then they set up a Mediation and Security Council of the Economic Committee and Community of West African States. And in that ECOWAS conflict prevention framework of January 2008, the Economic Community of West African States has proven the capacity to undertake successful conflict prevention, peacemaking, and conflict resolution under the protocol relating to the mechanism for conflict prevention, management, resolution, peacekeeping, and security of the 10 December 1999 as referred to mechanism. So we can go on and on.
Okay, so how feasible do you see this plan to set up a regional force by the Ecowas as it is being proposed?
Yes, it is likely. Since the conflict in Liberia and Sierra Leone and the tremendous effort made by Nigeria during General Babangida, General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida made a very strategic move, established the Ecowas and moved in to stabilize Liberia. He didn't go there alone. There were the coalitions of some West African states, but he didn't go without the approval of the United Nations. The United Nations gave their approval that such regional effort of peacekeeping must also take place in regions in order to take up the body of the United Nations peace conflict resolution because of the shortage of funding and logistics. So at that time, Babangida moved to Liberia. Liberia was at the verge of collapsing totally. While Europe was facing the Serbia-Herzegovina crisis, and NATO was intervening. If you remember, President Clinton was there. He was overwhelmed by the European crisis then. Africa seemed to be neglected. Rwanda's crisis came up almost at that same time. So it was overwhelming. But then the West African Ecowas region was able, through Nigeria, to set up a military force and to move in despite some opposition of the French African countries such as Côte d'Ivoire during Hope of Boigny and other resistance that Nigeria had. Then Nigeria and Ghana moved into Liberia to stabilize the country after the resolution of the United Nations Security Council that gave a move, that gave a headway, an approval for the Ecowas forces.
Okay, now, okay, so do you think that this move will bring stability in some of these West African countries where we have seen coups and some of the conflicts? To what extent will it bring stabilization there?
Well, kinetic measures such as the military force, military high command, minus of the problem totally, it may only reduce the occurrence, but it may not solve the entire problem. Because if you remember here, I told you there are triggers to this conflict, and then there are accelerators of this conflict. So it's not to set up a military high command in order to intervene. You are only intervening, but then if you go to the root of the problem, such as inflation, electoral fraud in those countries,
So
and then assassination, political assassination.
So you are saying that the solution is rather internal than regional.
Most of the solutions within the state are internal. External intervention comes into either alleviate, accelerate, or make the matter even worse. For example, we have seen that in Mali. We have seen that in Burkina Faso, where the French force went in there and made the matter to the war. So, an Ecowas High Command is welcome in this West African sub-region. Only with sincere good political will. Good political will to solve the problem.
All right.
Where else can you solve electoral fraud? We are going into 2023 election in Nigeria. If there are frauds here and there, how does the High Command come in? If there are assassinations and very unbecoming political class, how do you solve such problems if it is not internal?
Okay.
Unconstitutional rule and so on are internal.
So, aside sanctions, and what else can the ECOWAS do to ensure that there are constitutional governments? We've seen that some of these countries have even breached timelines and agreements to transit to democratic government.
Well, the ECOWAS needs to have its presence in all the 15 West African countries. Structures, intergovernmental structures that will bring development within the region. Currently, there must be some coordination between countries.
All right.
In coordination here, I mean cooperation. The French-speaking countries and the Portuguese-speaking countries, together with the British or the English-speaking countries, are not having a very good cooperation as I have seen them.
Okay.
In most cases.
Okay. Do you see Africa having a permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council as something that will make any difference in the conflicts that we see on the continent?
Why not? If the United Nations will democratize, and then some very good countries like South Africa, Nigeria, Algeria, and Kenya, of course, you will see some changes there. And definitely, these countries will speak like Africans. They will advance their cause in the United Nations. Why not?
All right. All right, thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update. Usman Mohammed, Professor of International Relations and Diplomacy, and also CEO, Center for Legislative Study in Africa. Thank you. We look forward to having you again.
Thank you. Ayuba, thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome. This is Africa Update on Trust Television, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. Coming up, we'll look at how Rwandan animators are creating comic books to enhance child literacy. Join us again for more. Rwandan animators responsible for creating comic books and games say that they will be using their skills to create animations that will boost child literacy in the East African nation, a development that is happening amid reports by the United Nations that says only 35% of African students have minimum competency in reading and 22% in mathematics by the end of primary school. Take a look.
13-year-old Serafin Iradukunda is one of many students in Nyamirambo, Rwanda, who gather at a non-profit called One Help, One Direction Ihumure to practice reading and spelling. In Kinyarwanda, Ihumure means to give hope. His reading has improved over the last few months, and he is now able to read to others. The non-profit says some students do not have suitable reading materials at homes or in schools, driving some who fall behind in class to the streets. But officials say the students are becoming interested in reading again, thanks to a new material featuring Rwanda superheroes, culture and traditions in comic books, animations, and games.
The stories were written. They add more drawings, because if you give a kid a book that there's no image or drawing inside, they cannot read that. So they just trying to do cartoon just through books, and I think they have started also doing video cartoon.
Academic researchers worldwide continue to study the use of comics and animation as effective educational tools. Several studies suggest that the comic books help students with reading comprehension and foster interest in voluntary reading. A creative studio called Emanzi produced the new materials for the students.
I think the comics and animes are really important because that's the environment we grew up into, even though the content was different. But that helped us to learn languages, that helped us to learn animals. I don't know, it helped us a lot.
Creators say one challenge is the lack of relatability and traditional African stories in the educational comic and anime markets. To help, they have created animations from Rwandan settings that students can easily connect and identify with.
So now if we can bring that into something that a kid or a child nowadays can relate to, like familiar with, like the environment he grows up into, rather than a far-fetched one. Even though it's far-fetched, but have something that has the sort of reality to it, it kind of helps them into shaping them to be people, I don't know. It kind of helps them a lot actually in identity.
The Rwanda Education Board, REB, is pushing for local content in education through policy and curriculums. But advocates say supply chain problems are still hampering social minorities' access to materials. Educational consultant Cyprian Bunani says digitalizing stories can help more students get the kind of material they need.
If you put voice over, so the voice, so it means that the voice actor will be able to read for a person who can't see sign language, even who can't see the book.
Emanzi says it will be adding animations on interactive phone applications that can also help children improve pronunciation.
All right, now let's take a look at Roundup Africa, some of the major stories from across the African continent. The Secretary of the Bar Association in Chad announced lawyers will appeal the prosecution of the October 20th demonstrators. This follows the sentencing of 262 people out of 401 arrested in a deadly protest in October by court. Around 50 people, including 10 members of the security forces, died when police opened fire on demonstrators in the capital, N'Djamena, and several other cities on October 20th, according to an official toll. Opposition groups denounce the official numbers and say that the real count was much higher, alleging unarmed civilians were massacred. The protest had been called to mark the date when Chad's ruling military had initially promised to cede power, a timeline that has now been extended by 2 years. A court in Mozambique has sentenced 2 former intelligence chiefs and son of a former Mozambican president to 12 years in prison in a massive corruption scandal known as the Hidden Debt. The former head of intelligence and state security, Gregorio Leo, and the former head of economic intelligence, Antonio do Rosario, along with Armando Ndambi, son of former President Armando Guebuza, were sentenced by a special court in the capital, Maputo. The case, which involved $2 billion in secret loans from foreign banks to Mozambican state-owned companies, had plunged the country into a serious financial crisis. The case relates to debt contracted by the government in 2013 and 2014 without parliament approval that prompted the IMF to intervene, triggering a sovereign debt collapse in 2016. Former Finance Minister Manuel Chang, who signed off the loans, has been held in South Africa since 2018, pending extradition to the US for allegedly using the U.S. financial system to carry out the fraudulent scheme. The Community of East African States has announced that armed groups and the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo will hold peace talks in January in eastern DRC following 3 previous meetings in Kenya. This announcement was made at the end of the 3rd session of the Inter-Congolese Dialogue, which brought together for 8 days in Nairobi representatives of some 50 armed groups and the government and the civil society group. The M23 rebellion, which is leading an offensive in the east of the country and which Kinshasa described as a terrorist movement, is not participating in these discussions. Participants also reiterated their agreement to a continued cessation of hostilities as well as the release of child soldiers and humanitarian access to the organization added. Now, meanwhile, Rwanda's foreign minister has accused the international community of exacerbating the crisis in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, plagued by armed groups, after the United States urged Kigali to stop any supposed support for the rebels. In a call with Rwandan President Paul Kagame, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken made it clear that all external support to non-state armed groups in the DRC must end, including Rwanda's support for M23. Fighting in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo between government forces and rebels from the M23, a former Tutsi rebellion, has heightened tensions with neighboring Rwanda, which the DRC accused of encouraging the militia, an allegation Kigali has repeatedly denied. Rwanda has repeatedly blamed the crisis in eastern DRC on authorities in Kinshasa and accused the international community of turning a blind eye to its supposed support for the democratic forces for the liberation of Rwanda, a movement of Rwandan Hutu rebels, some of whom were involved in the 1994 Tutsi genocide in Rwanda. South Africa's ruling party gave its full support to President Cyril Ramaphosa in the wake of a scandal, announcing that its members in parliament, where they have a majority, will vote against impeachment proceedings. The party's top national executive committee has decided that it will vote against the adoption of the parliamentary report, which has indicted the head of state and whose findings have paved the way for impeachment proceedings. African National Congress Secretary General Paul Mashatile said. Now, meanwhile, ANC's backing of President Cyril Ramaphosa in his farms scandal has sparked strong reactions at the parliament from both sides of the political spectrum, while opposition leader John Tuchene of the Democratic Alliance denounces a tactic taken out from the Zuma playbook. ANC's chief whip Penny Majodina says that the party decided to stand with Ramaphosa because the panel's conclusion is not very conclusive. And that's a wrap on Africa Update for this week. You can watch more via all our social media platforms and also on our YouTube channel. I am Ayuba Ila. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.